Have you ever been in an argument where you just know you're being fair, but the other person is absolutely convinced that you're not? It is one of the most maddening feelings in the world, right? Well, today, we're going to dig into that. Our universal and, let's be honest, often frustrating obsession with fairness, and what really happens when our ideas about it just don't line up. So let's just start there. Why? Why does this one idea have such a powerful grip on all of us? It's a feeling we all recognize, a standard we all demand, and yet it seems to be at the root of so much conflict. What is really going on here? Well, it turns out it goes deep. It comes down to something really fundamental about how we're wired as human beings. We are pattern-seeking creatures. We're constantly trying to find a single, logical explanation for how the world should work. And we have this deep-seated belief that if we could just find that one perfect, universal pattern for fairness, then of course, everybody would see it, they'd get it, and we'd all just follow the rules. But, it is never, ever that simple. And this is exactly where we hit the main problem. It's this huge gap between the ideal of fairness that we're all searching for and the much, much messier reality of how it actually works in our day-to-day lives. So look at this breakdown. This is the whole conflict in a nutshell. The ideal we're chasing is that fairness is objective, it's simple, it's this one single pattern that applies to everyone, everywhere. But the reality, it's completely subjective, super complex, and shaped by everything from our genetics to our upbringing. Basically, each and every one of us develops our very own personal brand of fairness. And when these unique personal brands of fairness bump up against each other, that's when you get fireworks. So, what does happen when these different, deeply personal definitions of fairness meet out in the real world? Well, they don't just shake hands and agree to disagree, they clash. And we're not just talking about simple disagreements here. These conflicts feel fundamental, because our sense of what's right and fair is tangled up with our moral compass, with our very identity. So when someone challenges our idea of fairness, it doesn't just feel like they disagree with us. It can feel like they're challenging our entire view of the world. Okay, now here is a really fascinating word that helps explain what we do in these moments. Exculpatory. In these clashes of fairness, we're not really just arguing our point. We are actively, desperately searching for evidence that is exculpatory. We're looking for proof that our view is the right one and that we are not the one at fault. It's almost like we're in a courtroom, trying to prove our own innocence and clear our name. So if we're all walking around armed with our own personal rulebook for fairness, and we're all looking for evidence to prove we're right, how on earth do we ever resolve anything? Well, thankfully, there's a pretty clear and practical framework for navigating these messy situations. And here it is, a really useful 3-step process. First up, you try to find some middle ground. Is there any way for both of your definitions of fairness to exist together? If the answer is no, you move on to step 2. You have to decide if this is a deal breaker. How important is this disagreement to the relationship, really? And finally, if there's just no path forward, the last resort is step 3. You agree to part ways. You accept that you're never going to see eye to eye on this one, and you move on. But you know what? Our arguments over what's fair, that's not actually the end of the story. Not even close. There's another, much more powerful force at play here, one that operates on a totally different level than all of our subjective debates. Yeah, long after we've had the argument, whether we found a middle ground or just walked away, something else is quietly moving in the background, making its way to the surface. And this brings us to this really beautiful and powerful idea. Truth travels quietly, but it never arrives late. Just let that sink in for a second. It's this idea that there is an objective reality out there that exists completely on its own, totally separate from our personal feelings about what's fair or what's not. So what does this actually mean? It means the truth of a situation doesn't need to yell and scream to be heard. It doesn't need to fight its corner. It just is. It has its own timeline. And when it finally does show up, it has this incredible way of just cutting through all the noise of our arguments and bringing total clarity. It's the ultimate resolution, and it doesn't depend on anyone's personal brand of fairness. And that leaves us with one last, really big question to think about. If we just accept that fairness is always going to be subjective, that everyone's definition is personal and unique, then does that mean the only real common ground we can ever hope to find isn't a shared sense of fairness at all, but instead the quiet, undeniable, and eventual arrival of truth?